Well, good afternoon. I'm William Murdoch, the Executive Director of the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission, also known as MORPC. On behalf of our board, our staff, our local governments, and regional organizations that make up MORPC, I want to thank you for joining us in our first ever virtual 2020 Summit on Sustainability. We're especially excited to be partnering on this summit with the Atlanta Regional Commission and their Executive Director and our good friend, Doug Hooker. You'll be hearing from Doug more in just a few minutes. We have a fantastic 2 days ahead, filled with wonderful speakers who will let you know about the latest in sustainability trends, projects, best practices, and so much more. And since you're watching from the comfort of your home or office, feel free to stretch and take breaks nearly any time you need to. Our theme for the summit is resilient, adaptable, bold, and we'll be focused on putting sustainable solutions into action in our everyday lives. Both MORPC and ARC put a lot of thought into developing today's program, which offers something for everyone, from panel discussions around greenways or energy policies, to sessions that explore access to water, teleworking, local governments, and everything in between. We'll have a whole lot more to share about sustainability-related efforts in our communities, too, in both the Columbus and the Atlanta regions. But for now, let's thank those making this wonderful summit possible. You'll see many of the sponsors of our breakout sessions as the summit continues, but I specifically want to thank Verizon, SWACO, and the Ohio State University. Although we can't applaud them all in this virtual format, I know we'll do it in spirit, so thank you to our sponsors. I also want to thank the teams at MORPC and ARC for working on this amazing event. It takes a whole lot of expertise, long nights, heart and soul to pull off an event in this environment, and they've done an excellent job. Particularly on my team, Amanda McEldowney's done an incredible job. So thank you, Amanda. Thank you, everybody at MORPC and ARC. But now, I'd like to welcome Atlanta's Park Pride Executive Director, Michael Halicki, and the Atlanta Regional Commission Director, Executive Director, Doug Hooker. Michael's going to lead us in a conversation that'll focus on our sustainability efforts in both of our regions. So welcome.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, William. I'm really excited to be here with you and Doug and with everyone. I'm really excited about the program that we have here today, and let's get things started with a couple of questions. Maybe we could start off with how this came together. Tell us a little bit about how this partnership between MORPC and ARC came about.
I'll happy to tackle that. No, I'll let the host tackle that first.
So it's a great question, and what you need to know is I'm a little bit intimidated because both of the other gentlemen on the screen are wearing bow ties, and if that tells you something, we have a great admiration for our friends in Atlanta. We are kindred spirits in so many things in the regional council world, in planning and sustainability. We're both from growing regions, state capital, major university. Our growth patterns look the same. We both have teams of really passionate boards and passionate staff members who really want to help local governments tackle sustainability and help local governments excel and learn from each other and sometimes get inspired or steal ideas from each other. And Doug and I, well, we've been friends through our national association at NARC, the National Association of Regional Councils, both in leadership. I'm a past president, he's the current president. We've done a lot of things, so it made sense to partner together.
Excellent. Anything to add, Doug?
Only that William is right. We have been great friends in the profession, and consider him a personal friend. And we started exploring the relationship of how we can work together with our two agencies about 5 or 6 years ago. Yeah. And through each of the years, we've done peer exchanges and other things. And so when they were thinking about doing this virtually this year because of the pandemic, they reached out to us and asked if ARC would love to be help and support in that. And we were very eager to do it and appreciate the opportunity and the invitation.
Well, that's excellent. Maybe we can turn now to the question of why. Why is it important to address resilience as a region, and what does it mean to do so?
William, I'll say something about that first, if you don't mind. I think the world acknowledges, for the most part, that climate change is driving everything. And I recently heard a speaker say climate justice is the most fundamental form of social justice we all have to address, because without it, everything else is a little bit superfluous. And so these kinds of efforts through sustainability summits, conversations, research to address issues that are affecting us, and how do we adapt as human beings, how do we adapt our systems, our built systems, and how do we also adapt to allow the natural world to be as wholesome as it possibly can in the face of human development pressures. So I think those are critical things. And so resilience, both at the human scale, at the built environment, and also in the natural environment, and how do we integrate and make those work together, I think is critical.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's never been more urgent for us to focus on sustainability and resiliency than I think right now. Much like Doug said, the crisis that we're in right now has really focused a new light on how vulnerable we are to environmental change, to economic downturns, and this impact it's so clear. It's been magnified upon disparities in each of our regions. And when we think about not just the short-term crisis but this crisis of climate and crisis of environment, we think that regions need to look at how businesses and infrastructure and everybody can rally around this and be ready to adapt, and how we can protect our most vulnerable residents. A good way to think about it is in environmental terms. When we think about air or water or ecosystems, they all cross boundaries. They cross city lines, and all of these things we're in it together on. These issues affect everyone in our region. So when we're thinking of why is this important to regions, the challenge we have is, can we work together? Can we be bold enough to address this as a group? I think there's a really important role for regional councils in this.
Mm-hmm. That brings us to the what. So maybe you can discuss a little bit about what each of your regions are doing to lead the effort around sustainability, and maybe with an emphasis on the way that both resilience and sustainability, what's happening right now and how you're responding in terms of your programming and your efforts.
Well, Doug, I can start if you want to.
Yeah,
so
if you would.
It's hard being virtual because you don't get those cues. Is he nudging me to go first or not? So,
Right.
Well, I think when we're looking at what's happening in our region, a regional council like MORPC has this really important role to look at big picture items. And so we've done this with things like what we call our regional sustainability agenda, which is a chance for our local governments and advocates to come together and talk about sustainability and resiliency in the region, and then set measurable goals so that we can really challenge ourselves to do more. We've got a way that takes that down a little bit to the community level that we call our Sustainable 2050 program, where local governments can track their own successes in their own work. They can challenge themselves. And instead of having requirements, we actually have rewards. So the more that they do, the more that they are recognized. We actually recognize them with a system similar to our friends in Atlanta, where we have silver or gold designation of sustainability. We've got these big, like, region-wide efforts like that. Another one that I'd mention is something we call Insight 2050, which looks at how growth and development in the region actually connects housing and transportation to things like the environment and sustainability. You can't plan to add people like we're having added to our region or in Atlanta unless you're also looking at how that impacts air quality or our ability to have water supply or those kind of things. I know our team is working on a lot more specifics, but Doug, I know you all are doing some really important work in Atlanta as well.
Thank you, William, and I apologize for stepping away. The reality of the virtual world is that people showing up at your front door and your dog barking is still true. Yeah, we've been doing a number of things for several years. I begin by mentioning our Livable Centers Initiative program, which started actually in the late 90s. And it, in a broad sense of sustainability, it was our attempt to try to stem the tide of ex-urban sprawl and really way out development that we were singing that Atlanta was infamously known for in the 70s and 80s and through much of the 90s. And that Livable Centers program was specific targeted planning grants along with construction program dollars to get communities to think about developing a more walkable urban fabric, even in suburban locations. And it has completely changed the nature of the growth in the region such that our outward growth, the sprawl factor, is relatively slow at this point in time. And more of the growth of the region is happening in denser, more urban, more walkable areas. And so that's one thing we did. But since the beginning of the 21st century, we've also had a program called Green Communities, in which we would certify. It was kind of like, it kind of is, excuse me, not was, it still is ongoing. It's kind of like lead for communities. You know, how do you get points for doing things as a government, as a community as a whole that emphasize re-waste, eliminating waste out of the waste stream, reuse, recycle, for energy and water efficiency, and all those great principles of sustainability that we're always looking to employ, but doing it at a community scale. And so, so cities and counties have determined that they want to get a green communities designation, which actually is attractive for new residents and new businesses. And so they can get a bronze, a silver, a gold, and now we even have a platinum level because some of our communities have gone beyond the gold level. And so to that, we've done that program for over 10 years, and it's been widely adapted and very popular. And now here recently, in lieu of climate change, we've adopted a climate conscious communities. So particularly for communities that are very interested in being deliberate and open about trying to minimize their carbon footprint and doing what they can to address climate change in a communal way. Our climate communities, our climate conscious program can be done as an augmentation to or separate from our green communities program. And those are some of the ways that we're trying to address sustainability and resiliency through our certification programs.
If I can add to that, I mean, what Doug's talking about, the work that we do, is really how regional councils can be really important actors when it comes to things like climate change, because our regions depend on us to have technical, smart, objective people. We use science and process and data, but we get really clearly that this all doesn't happen in a vacuum, where we have to bring neighbors and government officials and businesses together to solve these issues. So that important role, that blended role, it may not seem revolutionary, but it actually can help us all benefit by making more informed decisions and by helping to take a little bit of the heat out of these really important discussions so we can get to solutions. And I know in our region, we want to focus on climate, and we're looking at what we call sustaining Scioto, which is our major river watershed here in the Columbus area, and how climate is interacting with that watershed, and how supply and agriculture and all of those issues connect into it, so that we can work together on issues like that. We do the same like Doug and his team on air and on greenways and so much more, but there's a really important role here for groups like us to help move this climate discussion and action forward.
Mm-hmm. Next question I'd like to ask you is just kind of, I think you've covered and where I was going to go with kind of what you're working on now and what's next, but I feel like we've already talked about what's next with the efforts of kind of moving into the climate conversation. I'm curious with each of you, just with the work that you're doing right now on sustainability, what are you most excited about that you haven't shared with us yet that might be worth putting out there to this group?
Will you? Well, I'll go first.
Okay.
You went first last time, so we'll trade off. I tell you what I'm really excited about, Michael, is within the last 2 years, we have really emphasized through our grant making and through our planning, how do projects adapt resiliency or reflect resiliency in the project design and construction. And that is a part of our assessment for our project prioritization. We've done that in our transportation infrastructure, particularly with regard to flood-prone areas or projects that will help recognize that they can be additive to or subtractive from creating more flooding kinds of incidents and things of that nature. So that's now part of our project prioritization for grant dollar allocations on projects, transportation projects in the region. And I think that's going to really begin to reshape long-term how we are doing the built environment, at least in the transportation network, in a way that is more amenable to supporting climate conscious behavior and design. So I'm very excited to see what is going to come out of that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and we'll definitely want to learn from how that effort goes, Doug. I know the one big thing that we're thinking about right now is something I know that's on a lot of our minds, which is taking advantage of what we're learning in this health crisis. And when it comes to sustainability and mobility, learning the lessons on how we can move so quickly to solve big problems. I know for so many of us, we've spent our careers working on things like increasing people's use of different modes of transportation or remote working or air quality. And some of these things happened in just a couple of weeks. And we've spent our careers running up against obstacles about how quickly governments or businesses or individuals can move and whether or not there's resources for it. And some of those things happened in just a couple of weeks. And when we're working on emerging from this crisis, when we're thinking about climate, we're really interested in that behavior change piece and how we can really tap into these lessons when it comes to sustainability. I'm sure Doug is the same way as we are. We hire a lot of young planners and sustainability experts. We actually have 3 doctorates in our planning area. But we hire a lot of students from Ohio State's Knowlton School, and they've got really high expectations, and they ask, well, why does this stuff take so long? And we don't have a good excuse anymore when it comes to it. And that doesn't diminish the tragic impact of that crisis we're in, but when we think about the crisis we're in when it comes to climate, I think we're really interested in learning those examples on behavior change and how we can move those things forward quickly. I'd be remiss in the Columbus area to not, if we're talking about a big idea, we are really honed in on transit. We are way behind when it comes to the types of investments around mobility we need to make. We're really behind when it comes to connecting housing to that. We look to Atlanta and what they've done with their livable communities as a way to inspire us to do more. But again, going back to my point about changing behavior, we've learned that things can move a lot faster if they really need to and if we can align people. And on those 2 issues, we really want to see if we can move that forward. It impacts climate, it impacts sustainability.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say, Michael, one more thing too,
yep.
And this is something that we're learning from our friends in Columbus and MORPC, is urban agriculture and urban food ecosystems. Mm. And they have been well ahead in this nationally. And we're trying to learn how to do more, help local communities do more food planting development and connecting urban farmers with distribution systems. Because that has a long-term sustainability because it helps cut down trips for trucks and other kinds of delivery vehicles into a region to bring food if you can grow more food, and also helps with public health, quite honestly, with having more nutrition available, particularly in communities that don't have access to good, robust food resources. So we're learning that from them.
That's great. I'd like to turn our attention right now to equity. And when you think about with sustainability, I think of the 3 E's with environment, economy, and equity. And I'm reminded of a cartoon that was shared by Michael Dobbins from Georgia Tech that showed these 3 overlapping circles, a big circle that's green with environment, a big circle with economy, and then a small little circle on equity with the tagline, "What's wrong with this picture?" And I feel like just thinking about the equity part of the sustainability conversation and just bringing it to home with what we've been dealing with right now. We've been dealing with the issues of COVID-19 and systemic racism, and with systemic racism issues coming to the forefront with the deaths of Ahmaud Arbery, Breonna Taylor, and George Floyd. Then when you look at COVID-19 and the disparities from the impacts on Black and Brown communities, I'm curious how this conversation of equity fits into sustainability as well as your efforts at the regional level.
I'll start by saying that I don't think true sustainability is possible unless, as a nation and as a society, we get honest about dealing with racial equity, or rather the inequities that have existed historically in our country's past and that exist structurally in our current arrangements. And the reason why I said is that for most of us, for many of our communities in Columbus and Atlanta are exactly the same in this. Our populations that are experiencing the most rapid growth are our people of color, African American, Latino, Asian American, of different nationalities. And so, and by and large, those populations have had less access to the kinds of financial and educational and workforce and economic privileges that that it would enable them to grow family wealth, grow generational stability. And so in the long term, if they can't find ways to access and grow their family's well-being from generation to generation, that we will have a destabilizing culture. And a destabilized culture is not one that can pay much attention to sustainability, quite honestly. Mm-hmm. You're just trying to scratch by with the basics of living. And so long-term sustainability also can only be effective if we're also changing economic mobility and addressing racial inequities that have existed in the past and currently exist structurally.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's an important question to ask, and I couldn't agree with Doug more on that perspective. The hard truth is our efforts in sustainability and resiliency haven't always brought an equity lens or a racial equity lens to our work. I know that everything we do in sustainability has a major focus on things like health or environmental justice or prosperity, but those things don't happen in a vacuum if we're not looking at some of the historical and the current trends that are going on when it comes to equity in our communities. We see this in our work. It doesn't matter which area of our work, we see it in all areas of our work. But with sustainability, you think about things like air quality, and Atlanta knows this really well. Certain neighborhoods in our region are more impacted by air quality efforts. And so the region as a whole has come into attainment, but there are neighborhoods, and they're particularly neighborhoods with non-white populations or new Americans that are impacted by poor air quality. We see this in our trail work, where our studies have shown we have really great access and use and quality trails around the region, but we're not serving certain neighborhoods very well, and we're not working and focusing to get all peoples to connect to it and see the benefits of it. And I think what really we spend a lot of time at MORPC thinking about is there's a disconnect here when it comes to our sustainability work and looking at things through an equity lens. There can be lots of reasons why people aren't showing up or our programs aren't addressing things through an equity lens, why certain neighborhoods or voices aren't at the table. But none of those are good excuses. And I think this is a hard truth for us as sustainability professionals. Just as we look at ecosystems, where you want to look at things holistically and you want to look why certain niches aren't focused on, and you want to look for nuanced effects, we have to do the same thing when we're talking about sustainability efforts in our regions and how racism informs that. And ask ourselves, when we hold meetings at a certain time and only certain demographic shows up, we don't shrug our shoulders and say, wow, I guess they're not interested. You say, well, wait a second, this doesn't make sense. And you work on how to establish relationships or look at the gaps in service. You ask yourselves those tough questions, so you make sure that all of your sustainability efforts are bringing this into focus. It's really important normally, but like Doug said, in our region too, more than half of our growth as we look towards 2050 are people from other countries or non-white individuals. And when we talk about growth, we say we want to maintain the quality of our economy and environment and way of life. Well, we're not going to do that for half of the growth that we're getting if we're not starting that planning right now and starting to think about systemic racism and that equity lens on our work.
And with regard to our efforts, Michael, because that was also part of your question, I know for a fact that ARC, and I think William would probably echo the same, is that a lot of our work systems-wise tries to address a lot of the social harms that have been done by inequity and past racist practices. However, we haven't done enough to really put a strong conscious equity lens on how we go about that work. And all of us as regional councils, all of our peers across the nation are grappling with this right now. The one thing I think that if there's anything that good that came out of the unfortunate deaths, murders of those three people, Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, and George Floyd, is that there is now a large awakening, and there can be no longer an excuse for why we don't do this. You know, some people could have said it before, I didn't know. I think the whole reply of I didn't know is no longer excusable anymore. And certainly in our profession, it's not. And I know for a fact that William and I talk constantly about how we hold ourselves and how our teams hold ourselves accountable for being deliberate and thoughtful about bringing equitable considerations and analysis into our work so that we're not continuing to perpetuate the things that have been perpetuated and foisted on people of color in the past.
That's great, Doug. And I will share that earlier today, I was at a session with the Atlanta Regional Commission on an equity training session that grew out of a trip to Pittsburgh from folks in Atlanta, where in Pittsburgh, we heard the cry, if it's not for all, it's not for us. And how do we bring that conversation to Atlanta? And I think that's something that I expect will come up in the sessions throughout the day of looking at making sure that equity gets its proportional level of attention in a summit on sustainability. So with that, I think that we're wrapping up our session. We're about to move into our pecha kucha presentations. And I'll turn it over to William.
Great. Thanks, Michael. Thanks, Doug. It's good to see you, if only virtually. We're so excited about the day ahead. I'm gonna turn it over to MORPC's Director of Planning and Sustainability, Dr. Kirsten Carr, to take us to our next session.
Thank you, William, and thank you, Doug and Michael, for this great conversation. It's always good to see these real-life examples on how we can learn with and from peers across the country. And as Doug and William have mentioned, we've had several peer exchanges with Atlanta before, and I truly wish you guys were here in person today, but it's good to see you on TV. And Doug and his team are exceptional professionals that do amazing work. In fact, we've taken quite a few pointers from them for our sustainability programs and initiatives, and so this is perfect that we are hosting the summit together this year. I'm Kirsten Carr, as William mentioned. I'm the Director of Planning and Sustainability at the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commission, and I oversee a broad range of sustainability initiatives, anything related to active transportation and greenways, water and air quality, transportation safety, energy, and development as well. And every day I have the pleasure of working with communities and organizations throughout this region to prepare for growth and the impact that it has on the environment around us. And I'm so thrilled to see so many of you online today and hopefully learning with you together. So today's topic, resilient, adaptable, bold, really captures the spirit of Central Ohio and many other regions today. It's an unprecedented time, but with new challenges also come new opportunities. And so our next lineup of speakers has ideas and thoughts on how we can all be just a little bit more bold and a little bit more flexible to make room for improvements, to ensure that we take care of each other and that we lift up our most vulnerable residents so they can thrive alongside us. So our 6 speakers aren't just giving you a plain old presentation. No, they are using the pecha kucha style to share their stories in less than 7 minutes with 20 slides that automatically advance every 20 seconds. And so as they're talking, I really want to encourage all of you to use the chat feature to share your kudos and your reactions with the rest of the audience. This is one of the advantages we have with this virtual world, this real-time feedback. And so with that, I'm going to kick us off. Please join me in welcoming our first pecha kucha speaker, John Talbert, committed, passionate, devoted.
You know, I never knew that a simple discovery could change my life and the lives of many others. But nor did I know that cycling and bicycling could help solve even the world's problems. How could that be? It just didn't make any sense because I never knew that cycling had the capability of solving world problems. Just like in road cycling, many times they say that professional cyclists, those who suffer the most, win the race. And that race is won oftentimes by the individual who suffers the most. Well, I come to discover that Marshall Major Taylor suffered in his race and for his race of people as a Black man in cycling. And he became the first Black world champion cyclist as a Black man in the early 1900s, a feat that is still somewhat unknown by many today. But because he was Black, you know, he suffered a great deal of racism, particularly in America. Oftentimes, you know, he would be assaulted or brutally beaten after winning a race by his fellow cyclists. So to save his life, his manager decided that he needed to move him to Europe, where there he won many cycling races and became the first Black cyclist world champion, even doing Jim Crow. This was something that was a solution to the problem of racism for Major Taylor, simply to move him to Europe. And in that process, he became the first Black world champion cyclist, even doing Jim Crow. Why was this significant? Well, because most of the time during his races, he was understood to be someone that had principles and character. And he did more than just pedal his way into history. From the standpoint of working with people who didn't know about him to becoming world champion, he became known as someone with class, dignity, and the ability to win a lot of races. But no one knew about him until this guy, George Harper, here in Columbus, Ohio, was in a local bike shop and saw an article about a world champion cyclist who was Black. No way, no way. How could this be? Well, for George's passion for cycling, he decided to come back and start a Major Taylor cycling club right here in Columbus that is comprised of 7 members. And to this day, since 1979, of the 7, 6 are still riding, or as we say, rolling, and many of us are in the ages of 60 and 70 years of age. So what was the problem? Well, the problem was nobody knew about Major Taylor. What was the solution? To start a Major Taylor cycling club. And to this day, the club has been recognized as the first African-American cycling club in the United States named after Major Taylor, which led to over 30 other clubs across the United States and one in Jamaica to be named after Major Taylor. To his credit, in all of our clubs, we have people from all races, all walks of life to show that we can end racism through cycling. The other thing, there were a lot of people who weren't cyclists that didn't know anything about Major Taylor. So we created a plaque and placed it at the beginning of the Three Creeks Bike Trail here in Columbus to show and demonstrate the history of Major Taylor as the first Black world champion cyclist. We also were able to convince the city to allow us to put in a portion of the trail named after Major Taylor. From this, in many other major cities, there are now Major Taylor cycling trails in cities, particularly a larger one located in Chicago, Illinois. Well, we also felt that we need to solve another problem. So the solution was to get youth involved in cycling. There, we were able to increase the number of kids here in Columbus and across the country who wanted to be involved in cycling. So we got them into cycling, teaching them about repairs and safety tips. We also discovered that there were many rural communities that didn't have bicycles. So we created a fund to give bicycles to youth in rural communities so that they could learn about cycling, Major Taylor, and cycling as another means of commuting to the store and to school. Now, some people say that well, you guys are obsessed with cycling. I've never seen that to be the case, because just because we have more than one bike doesn't mean that we're obsessed. I don't need that kind of negativity in my life, so they can go. But we do enjoy the passion of cycling. And so for that, we realized that cycling can also, for many cities, be a way of commuting to work, to school, to play, increasing healthy activities. We even have people who have joined our club that have had health problems and have overcome them through cycling. Some have come with depression, have overcome that as well. But the camaraderie is most important. The main thing to remember about this is that there is a guy who, through all the adversity that he faced in the early 1900s, named Marshall Major Taylor, who became a world champion cyclist, that solved the solution of racism for his race and for himself through cycling, which led to a club here in Columbus, Ohio, that is now known throughout the country as the first Major Taylor Cycling Club in his honor. And we will continue to ride in Major Taylor's honor as long as we can turn the pedal, because we've also discovered that cycling is more than just pedaling. Thank you very much.
Leah Evans, intentional, curious, change advocate.
I'm going to warn you, this is going to feel a little like you're watching me, someone who's never driven a semi, try to back up a semi. You're going to wonder if I'm going to make it. Will I crash? There may be some cringing, but I'm going to start with where I come from, go into a little planning history, bring that forward to 2020, and tie it all back into sustainability. Let's see how I do. I'm from Cleveland, born and raised in Cleveland Heights, a first spring suburb in the true sense of the term. I grew up in a diverse, walkable community with great recreation, mixed use nodes, and easy access to transportation. I share this because there was a time when people and policies shaped our communities, but I think that now our communities are shaping us. That being said, as a Clevelander, I'm also a Browns fan. And in the late 80s, the Browns had several near misses at greatness. 87, 88, 89. We'd be this close to a win, and then it'd be snatched away from us. And so as I think about resiliency, that's informed by my experiences with the Browns. Jane Jacobs, a journalist, author, and activist who heavily influenced urban studies, sociology, and economics, stated that the point of cities is the multiplicity of choice. So whether you live in an urban, rural, a township, in a city, in a densified area, in an expansive rolling hills, where we live is in fact impacting all aspects of our lives and our choices. If you look at some of the work that's been done around social determinants of health and the history of things like redlining in our community, you can draw direct correlations between the impact of where we live in our health and our life expectancy, in our job attainment, in our educational attainment, and our potential income. So let's go back to where we were. In the late 1800s, early 1900s, the practice and discipline of urban planning began to take form. And a lot of it was because we were all growing and learning to live together in new ways and new spaces. As our country grew, the opportunities for development brought more and more challenges. So think about the settlement house movement, dealing with issues of noise, traffic, population growth, air pollution, sanitation. All of these were becoming major social challenges. And for example, the New York City Tenement Act of 1901 was born from the work of a photographer documenting the lived experiences of the poor and underserved in the city. So we come up with some ideas. The City Beautiful movement was one. It was the idea that through the built environment, we could impact societal outcomes. So by comprehensive planning efforts that would beautify and add grandeur to our cities, it would solve the social ills of that time. Continue that on to the planned developments that we see today even. Suburbs, our Transportation Act. And as the discipline and profession of planning took shape over the next 100 years, academically, policymaking, municipal support, and investment shaped all of the places that we lived. But you think about this quote, terror is a form of urban planning. You think about things like white flight, suburban growth and migration, about the Transportation Acts and different investments that we've made in the community, and how planning has now become a result of other concerns in our community. So bring that back. One of this slide is a little bit older because we've had more than 91,000 cases in Ohio at this point. But if you look now at where coronavirus cases are heaviest, and you lay that over where we have life expectancy. Back to the slide we showed previously, you start to see some correlations between life and death in planning. So today, what's going on in our society? Major social unrest. Things like we've had more geological, meteorological, hydrological, and climatological events. This is a study from the Institute of Insurance that just informs us on how many major occurrences in the natural disaster space we've had. And of course, the pandemic, which similarly to 1918 flu, are now informing how we live and interact with people in our everyday lives. And what does that mean for how we are now using space differently, whether that be our homes or our public spaces and private spaces? We have major social unrest. And what has that done to inform how we live in spaces, particularly our dense urban communities and the inequalities that we see that have developed in those spaces? So as we look forward, what does that mean for us? I'm a planner by education, by nature, and by that is the heart of community building. So I look at a plan as a great way forward. But what happens when that plan is not informed by many different viewpoints? What happens when that plan only is formed from one set of principles or ideas, as we may have seen in something like the City Beautiful movement? So you ready? I'm bringing it back to the Browns. So for many years, we were waiting for the Browns to bring us home a championship. But what if we were sitting and waiting in the wrong arena? In 2016, the Cavs were the team that brought home a championship for the city of Cleveland. And if I was sitting in the Browns Stadium, still yet waiting for that championship, I would have missed it. So what can we do differently and look to differently to inform our ideas as we go forward? David Thorpe is a writer of fiction and nonfiction, and he wrote his article of 21 features of the future sustainable city. One of those he noted was the idea of the collective wisdom of crowds. So like a Wikipedia, where you can get information sourced from a wide variety of ideas, knowledge, and experiences. The same is true for us in the planning profession. I love a good community meeting. I love to get people together and talk and hear. But now, even as we think about how we do that going forward, we need to be thoughtful of how we can be more inclusive with sourcing those ideas and bringing more voices to the table. I'm back to Jane Jacobs, a favorite of mine. But as she said, cities have the capability of providing something for everybody, but only if they're created by everybody. And that's the responsibility of each of us to, as planners, as engineers, as civic leaders, engage those others. Bringing it back one more time, I would say, if you're watching the headlines recently, the Browns are currently 4-1. That's the best starting record we've had since 1994. So as I think about planning, we're still the best suited for the win. It just depends on how we plan to go about it.
Sean Aurora, passionate, animated, humorous.
Buildings are humanity's most abundant creation. We are a species that builds and builds and builds. And increasingly, Buildings for humans are like water for fish. In the United States, we spend about 90% of our time indoors, and this figure was determined prior to COVID. Buildings have a tremendous impact in the United States. About 12% of our water and 71% of our electricity are consumed directly in buildings. If you take a look at our landfills, about 40% of what's in the landfill comes from the construction industry, and about 40% of the entire country's CO2 is attributable to buildings. We owe a huge debt of gratitude to the various green building standards that exist today. They have moved the market, building code, and conversation towards better buildings for the environment and occupants. But in a world facing environmental challenges and all of the equity impacts that come with them, is it enough to do better? For the Living Building Challenge, the answer is no. In a resource-constrained world, incremental change is not a viable option. Buildings have to be regenerative like flowers and give back more than they take. They have to be self-sufficient to the greatest extent possible, and they have to create a positive impact for people and planet. The Living Building Challenge is framed around 7 performance areas called petals. They are place, water, energy, health and happiness, materials, equity, and beauty. Projects have to meet all of the requirements, improve performance over 12 months of occupancy. Folks, that's why it's called a challenge. And this brings us to the Candida Building for Innovative Sustainable Design, which is at the Georgia Institute of Technology in Atlanta. It is a 37,000 square foot indoor, plus another 10,000 square foot outdoor, multidisciplinary, non-departmental education building. And friends, it's absolutely amazing. It's designed to harvest more rainwater each year than it uses, and it manages wastewater on site. It produces more solar electricity each year than it consumes. During the construction process, it diverted more waste from landfills than it sent to landfills, and that's just a tip of this building's regenerative features. But we don't have enough time to cover everything. So please visit our website and subscribe to our various social media channels to learn more. And now I'll highlight features that we believe exemplify the benefits that regenerative buildings have for their communities in which they're located. Let's begin with water, because water is life. The Candida Building manages rainfall much as a forest would. During a normal rain event, 90% of the water remains on site. This reduces stormwater runoff that floods streets and negatively impacts downstream communities. That's an equity win. And it also reduces burden to infrastructure. That can save taxpayers money. The building is creative in reusing all types of water. HVAC condensate is used for on-site irrigation. Gray water collected from showers, sinks, and water fountains is pumped to a constructed wetland where plant and soil filter the gray water. In a conventional building, these types of water would go down the drain, and that's such a waste. Now let's talk about the icky stuff. Foam flush toilets use about a tablespoon of water to deposit your waste into bins in the basement. Basically, we brought an outhouse indoors. Natural systems break down your waste into compost. Our toilets do not connect to the sewer. Think about that. Moving on to energy. Here's how the building gets to net positive. It's built well. Air doesn't come in or leave unless we want it to. And there's lots of natural lighting. We have efficient systems like fans. And this gets the building to 72% more efficient than a conventional building. And then we add solar to get us to net positive. Materials is the most complicated petal. A main reason is because we're surrounded by harmful chemicals that the Living Building Challenge aims to eliminate. We vetted materials in the Candida Building to the greatest extent possible against a red list of 22 worst in class chemicals. But shouldn't there be an easier way to rid our buildings of toxins? Packaged foods have a nutrition label so you know what you're consuming. Shouldn't you have something similar for building materials, considering we spend 90% of our time or more indoors? Thankfully, there are certifications that vet materials for toxicity. And the Declare label is like a nutrition label that lets you know whether your building products contain harmful materials. The materials petal also requires the incorporation of salvaged material. We took materials from renovations, demolitions, and storm events. We milled them into stairs, tiles, and furniture for the building. This diverted perfectly reusable material from the landfills and provided local employment for workers who salvaged these items. If we scaled regenerative buildings, we could spark an industry that doesn't exist, what we call a salvage economy. Just imagine going to your local home improvement store and checking out their selection of repurposed materials that were diverted from the local landfill. If we created land, we can turn this into reality. Now you're probably thinking, but how much does all of this stuff cost compared to a conventional building? Well, keep in mind that this building's upfront cost includes 25 years of net positive energy, water for the life of the building, and no sewer fees. So a proper comparison has to consider lifetime operating costs, not just upfront costs. But here's another way I conceptualize cost. We say flush it down, throw it away, without thinking about where our waste goes. Therefore, shouldn't we also consider the societal costs of where our waste goes? Because it doesn't go to Mars. It stays on this planet, and we're all paying a price. Our future generations to come are still going to be paying the price. The Canida building shows that our bio-waste can be diverted from sewers and turned into compost. Instead of ending up in a landfill, construction waste can become the spark for a local industry that provides locally sourced building materials. You know, there's a saying, you can't unlearn what you learn from a living building project. You now have the knowledge to demand more of your policymakers, the contractors that construct your buildings, the companies that make your products. Demand a society that is less toxic for you and nature. We all deserve buildings that are built for people and planet.
Rachel Cleet, professor, researcher, optimist.
I'm an optimist, and I'm such an optimist that one of my students actually gave me a book where I could write down evidence that the world is basically good. One of the things I've been writing in my book is about people who know that they're extraordinarily lucky in the world, and they give a damn that other people aren't. In my job, I think a lot about opportunity and how it comes to be, and that means that, so opportunity in my life happened because my dad was able to go to college. This is him in World War II. He's Private Al Garshik. And because during the war he went to school, and after the war he went to school on the GI Bill. And that meant he was able to save money so that I could go to college and graduate without any debt. He was also able to build this house. This is the house my dad built in 1953, and he lived there for 60 years with my mom. And the thing is, he got a loan to do this, and Black and brown Americans weren't able to go to school on the GI Bill, and they weren't able to get loans to have houses. And so they were not able to use what has become the single most important source of wealth for Americans. The other thing that's changed is the way in which our economy produces jobs. There used to be jobs that you didn't have to go to college for that earned enough money for you to provide for your family. And now our economy is producing a lot of jobs where that is just not the case. The other thing that's happening is it's increasing the inequality in our society. So on this grid, the vertical grid is inequality, and across the bottom are decades from 1970 to 2010. The blue shows increasing household inequality, and the red shows even greater inequality between neighborhoods. Now, this inequality is not just about economics. It's also enhanced by policies that created segregated neighborhoods by race. The cover of Richard Rothstein's 2017 book shows the colors that were the most risky, yellow and red, the 1930s HOLC map, Homeowners Loan Corporation map, where blue and green were the least risky and got a lot of loans. Now, this has an impact on us even today. My colleague, Jason Reese at Ohio State, has shown that in the green and blue neighborhoods, nowadays, people have almost 10 or 13 years more life expectancy than those that were rated red or yellow. So the question is, what now? What do you do about this? And why is this a problem? Well, it's not just a problem because of life expectancy. There's also a problem that not making enough money and living in a neighborhood that is somewhat unstable means that you might move a lot in your life, because that's the only thing you can do to control the choices that you're making for your family. And it's possible that you could be stably housed, but you might pay more for housing, you might have a hard time paying rent, which means you move. And stable housing is really, really important for kids to go to school, because you can't study if you don't know where you're living. So the kids, though, what do we do about the kids? So some friends of mine and I were talking about this. What do we do? What can we do? And research came out that even if a kid lives in an opportunity neighborhood for a year, they will do better in life, have better life outcomes. So my friends and I started thinking, well, maybe we should try to think out of the box. We can't fix the whole system, but maybe we can do something now to make a difference. And so we started talking to a lot of people and ended up creating a pilot program of 10 families who were able to move to areas of opportunity. Our goal was to stabilize them in opportunity housing for a short time so that they could increase healthcare access, their kids could be less absent to school, they could have better education opportunities and have a predictable home. And that would reduce stress and produce physical health benefits for their moms and improve life outcomes for the kids. This is a picture of the first bunch of people that we did this with. Most of these people in this picture are volunteers. And with them, we were able to create this program that complements other kinds of programs that actually do community development to improve neighborhoods. Now, the thing for me that really does make me an optimist is that all these people are here and have been donating their time. And with them, we were able to move people from what are the blue squares on this map to the pink squares. In the bottom of the map, the lighter colors are places of low opportunity in the Columbus metropolitan area. And on the top of the map, the dark squares are high opportunity. So we were able to move people basically from the inner ring suburbs to outer ring suburbs. And this has had a huge impact on their lives. It really has reduced stress in the family. As this woman said about her son, my oldest son had stress headaches, and those are gone. I used to see him have a headache twice a month, at least once a month at the old house, but now those have subsided. So the impact on the mom and the kids has been huge. Also because we've been working with developers who own over 25,000 units of rental housing in the metropolitan region. And those developers were really, really special because they modified their rental criteria because they were working with us. Otherwise, these folks could not have lived in that housing. And what's produced this outcome is really, what's happened with the good housing is better housing has meant better health. Much to our surprise, asthma got better because the housing these women were living in with their families before was in those formerly red line neighborhoods with really bad housing that never got money to fix them up. So the other thing that's happened is the reduction in stress has really allowed them to think about what they want for their families. Half of the women have actually gotten better jobs since living in the housing because they're not worried anymore. It was a huge thing to have all that worry, and now they can step back and think. Now imagine if we had to have that kind of worry all the time. So what we've been able to do is produce hope, and I have 3 things I want to ask of you. First of all, developers keep pushing to create lots of different kinds of housing in neighborhoods. You have done this, you are great, and you are able to produce housing that can house many different kinds of people, despite whatever, no. The other thing is, governments, I want you to think about how to produce lots of different housing in your neighborhood. Modify your zoning codes, modify your design codes, work with your communities so that many different people can enjoy the opportunities that are in your neighborhoods also. And then lastly, the last thing I really want you to do is think about how to get together with other people and volunteer. This is one of our meetings from last week. Half of the people on this call are volunteers. If we all gave 1 hour a month, what could we do? So I want to ask your help in reducing these systemic inequality and access to opportunity and help these kids have good lives. Thank you.
Jason Frazier, TV reporter, meteorologist, former banker.
All right, good day, everybody. It is great to be a part of this Summit on Stability. I am meteorologist Jason Frazier. So want to get started in talking a little bit about why I became a meteorologist. As a kid, I was always very fascinated with clouds and why storms happen. And my mom always used to tell me that I always used to like to know the why something existed. One of the other things I thoroughly enjoy about being a meteorologist is saving lives. As you know, there are a number of severe weather events that happen every year, from tornadoes to hurricanes, and my job is incredibly important in that process. So speaking about severe weather, it has a huge impact on the U.S. economy. And matter of fact, over the last 35 years, according to the National Weather Service Enterprise Analysis Report, the average number of $1 billion weather events has actually doubled. So we are finding that severe weather events are happening more frequently, and they're actually having a huge impact to our economy. If you added up all of the damage from 1980 to about 2019, according to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, which tracks all of this, these severe weather events have resulted in nearly $2 trillion of damage. So that includes everything from droughts, severe thunderstorms, hurricanes, tornadoes. And you are very familiar with some of these weather events. They include things like Hurricane Katrina, Superstorm Sandy, Hurricane Harvey. Each of these storms have resulted in anywhere between $70 to $125 billion worth of damage. So one of the things that we are finding as scientists is that these disasters are becoming more frequent. This is a chart that was contributed to the NOAA Foundation. And what we've basically found is that since the 1960s, on average, the number of hurricanes is actually happening more frequently in the Atlantic Ocean. We're also finding that wildfires are also getting worse. This was a chart that was developed by the National Interagency Fire Center, and you can see that the total number of acres on average burned is going up, and we're also finding that the acres that are impacted by fires overall is going up as well. And one of the reasons why we're finding that more wildfires are happening is because of droughts, or what scientists are referring to as mega droughts. And according to a recent study by Columbia University researcher Park Williams, across 9 U.S. states, from Oregon to New Mexico, the nearly 20-year drought is almost as bad or worse than it's ever been over the past 1,200 years. So when speaking about these weather disasters, before 2000, television and newspapers were the primary weather source for people on getting the information. And within the last 10 to about 15 years, we've been finding that there has been a huge amount of fragmentation. So what I'm referring to with fragmentation is how people are getting that information now. People are no longer depending on just television. They're getting it from radio. They're getting it from their online sources, whether it's blogs, social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, and they're also getting it from their smartphone apps. And, the apps, we have a love-hate relationship with them as meteorologists. The apps are actually wrong, according to one study, up to about 50% of the time. And part of the reason why is because sometimes they're based on weather stations or observations that are anywhere from 20 to about 30 miles away. So that's why sometimes your weather app will say, hey, it's actually raining, and you'll look up and you'll actually see some sunshine. Now, apps can be a good thing, right? They provide a way for you to get weather information directly in your hand. And this is especially important when we are talking about the increasing number of severe weather events like tornadoes, like hurricanes. So previously, most people would just watch us online. Now, if there's a tornado warning that's issued by the National Weather Service, we can actually send that information directly to your phone. The other thing is, if there's a weather event that happens overnight, guess what? Most people know you're sleeping, so you can't be alerted. But if we can send you that information via your phone overnight, it's a good thing. So this means that it is of great importance that we make sure that everyone is connected in ensuring that as these weather disasters are becoming more frequent, that people have a way of getting their information. And the reason why is because if they aren't connected, then that means that we could see an increase in the amount of property damage, the economic impact, and also the mental health impact as well, in terms of people not understanding why these disasters are happening and when they're going to happen. Ultimately, whether or not we are connected and getting this weather information, we all end up paying the price, whether it's through increasing insurance rates and taxes, the impact on tourism, where people just don't really feel like they should be visiting a certain place. And then, of course, there's the impact to our agricultural community in terms of damages to farms. So bottom line, TV still remains the primary source for weather information, but here's what you can do right now to ensure that you're prepared. Figure out who exactly do you trust for weather information and why. And you should also be thinking about where are you getting the latest information from? Is it from television? Is it from internet? And is it from smartphones? And then how can you ensure that everyone is connected? And then lastly, you know, these severe weather events, they're going to happen. But due to some climate change and other factors, severe weather is going to continue to happen even more. And remember that we all share the responsibility of ensuring that everyone is connected. And sustainability requires us to all be connected and be aware of when the next weather disaster is going to happen. Thank you.
Melissa Thompson, avid reader, corporate lawyer, first-time mom to be.
Good afternoon. My name is Melissa Thompson, and I am the Director of Regulatory Policy for Columbia Gas of Ohio. As some of my responsibilities include not only our regulatory filings and ensuring they're made timely and correctly, but I also oversee our energy efficiency program with Columbia Gas. Columbia Gas of Ohio has been in service for over 100 years in the state of Ohio. Today, we have 1.4 million customers, and we operate in 61 out of 88 counties. Though it seems interesting that a gas company would be interested in curbing the usage of its customers, Columbia has done just that over the years. Beginning with a collaborative in 1983, Columbia, along with other nonprofit agencies here in the state of Ohio, developed the Warm Choice Program. The Warm Choice Program targets, and still targets today, our lowest income customers with the greatest need for weatherization. This program targets whole home weatherization efforts. It also provides vital safety inspections on gas appliances. Columbia ensures that any customer's gas leaks are fixed, and the program repairs or replaces any gas appliances that are deemed unsafe. Through these efforts, the Warm Choice Program has been able to assist over 71,000 customers in the state of Ohio. Columbia has invested over $215 million in the Warm Choice Program. Columbia estimates the program has saved nearly 2 million MCF of natural gas, which will occur over the lifetime of the measures that are installed. This translates to 119 tons of carbon emissions avoided, which equates to taking 23,000 cars off the road. Through these efforts, Columbia has been able to reach customers through the traditional means of bill inserts and direct mail efforts. Columbia also partners with its Warm Choice providers such as COAD, Ground Level Solutions, Neighborhood Housing Services of Toledo, and MORPC. Though Columbia uses traditional means, Columbia tried to find a more unique way to reach customers and engaged a marketing contractor who used digital marketing to reach customers. These include paid Facebook ads, paid search on Google, banner ads, referral cards, and door-to-door hangers. Columbia's marketing contractor also included some unique locations to include its materials. This includes Job and Family Services, a local DHL warehouse, and working with landlords to distribute materials to their tenants. These tactics have increased Columbia's reach to customers to over 14 million impressions between 2017 and to date in 2020. Even with these successes, Columbia was challenged to find maybe something outside of the box to find a way to reach customers. We had to look beyond the traditional marketing route. This is where Columbia found a unique opportunity to partner with its nonprofit partners. Columbia found a way to do this by using reusable grocery bags to support local food banks. This way, in each of those reusable grocery bags, we were able to include our Warm Choice information for customers and a card. In that card also included our energy assistance programs and other ways to reach Columbia, to reach needy customers in the state of Ohio. Not only was this a way to have an environmentally friendly way for our consumers to shop for their local produce, but it was also a way to educate customers and, importantly, reach customers to where they are. Some of the local food banks that we partner with include the Mid-Ohio Food Collective, Lutheran Social Services, St. Stephen's Community House, the Nelson Food Cupboard in Athens County, Each of these food banks provide an opportunity for us to reach our customers where our traditional marketing efforts had failed. We also partnered with MASH, the Military and Service Heroes Food Pantry in Delaware, Ohio. For those not familiar with MASH, it helps American veterans, military families, and survivors by way of food, clothing, and personal hygiene. Again, another opportunity to reach our neediest customers. In addition to MASH, we also worked with Local Matters, a nonprofit close to my heart because I am a board member. And in Local Matters, in addition to providing a great necessary service for our local community here in Central Ohio, we also were filling our blessing boxes with food, as well as partnering with the Veggie Van as a way to reach customers. In addition to all of these nonprofits, our reach continues to expand as we look for other local partners, not only here in Central Ohio, but throughout the state of Ohio, including Second Harvest of North Central Ohio, Jewish Family Services, and all of our Salvation Armies throughout Ohio. Columbia's partnerships have expanded beyond nonprofits. Columbia has also partnered with municipalities. The City of Dublin requested Columbia to get information about its programs. We provided Dublin senior citizens with warm choice, natural gas safety, energy assistance, and energy payment assistance programs information. In addition to the City of Dublin, Columbia has just finalized its partnership with the City of Columbus with the American Cities Climate Challenge Initiative to weatherize 600 low-income homes between January of 2019 and July of 2020. By partnering with the City of Columbus, we were able to target neighborhoods such as Linden, Franklinton, Hilltop, Near East Side, Milo Grogran, and the University District. Finally, we've partnered with quasi-governmental entities. This includes a partnership with the Columbus Metropolitan Housing Authority and MORPC to target eligible customers who are renting in CMHA-approved homes and with their landlords. Columbia continues to try to find ways and unique ways to reach its customers other than our traditional marketing efforts. We encourage all of you to also find these unique ways and these unique partnerships to reach our neediest customers in Central Ohio and throughout the state. Through these partnerships, we're able to meet customers where they are and not rely on our traditional means of reaching customers through bill inserts, or even worse for us, direct mail. So we would just want to say thank you all for your time today. We appreciate the time to talk about energy efficiency, and we hope everyone has a wonderful day and a great afternoon. Thank you very much.
Oh my gosh, I love the Pecha Kucha talks. They are so inspiring and just absolutely love seeing the talent in our sustainability world, not just locally, but across this nation. So I wish Pecha Kucha speakers, you could hear it, but everyone is clapping and thanking you in spirit, I guess. So hopefully this lunch plenary got you excited for the rest of the day. We have many great breakout sessions prepared for you. So go ahead and again visit morpc.org/summitlive to choose which ones you'd like to attend and figure out how you can get in. And if you ever need assistance, simply send an email to Amanda, amckeldowney@morpc.org. You should have gotten a reminder email from her today, so you can reply to that one. Just a quick reminder too, there are professional credits available, and staff in each breakout session can help you if you have any questions about those. But with that, I want to get you moving. The first breakout starts at 1:15, and we will have another round of breakouts at 2:30, and then we'll end the day with a conversation around sustainability between MORPC and our the Atlanta region at 3:45. So with that, have a wonderful time today, and then don't forget to come back online tomorrow again for more breakout sessions and our featured keynote speaker, Catherine Hayhoe. Thank you.